Hello again, fellow audiophiles. You're a little farther away today because we needed a little bit wider shot to be able to get what we are talking about in today. And that is the HiFiMan Shangri-La Jr. Electrostatic Headphone System. This comes as a electrostatic headset, which looks like this, which is open back and around the ear, and a matching Energizer. Okay, which again, they just together is the Shangri-La Jr. headset, Shangri-La Jr. Energizer. If you buy these as a matched set from HiFiMan.com as well as some other retailers, it goes for 8,000 USD, okay, as a set. You can buy the two items separately if you wish. 4,000 USD for the headset, 5,000 USD at a couple of places for the Energizer. So there is a bit of a discount by buying them together. Disclaimers. HiFiMan sent these to me for review. They have asked nothing in return other than an honest and fair evaluation and a link to this review. They have made no other attempt to influence my opinion in any way other than that. So we will go ahead and jump into shameless self-promotion, and then we will come back and talk about these units. Hey, thanks for watching this video. Please remember to hit that like button, and if you haven't, please subscribe. Also, I have a Patreon set up so that you can help support me on a monthly basis, and I've set up a PayPal donation so that you can help me out in that way too if a monthly subscription does not make sense for you. Links for all of that, including the benefits, in the description below. Please check those out. All right, on with the show. All right, bringing the camera in a little bit closer to look at the build of the headset here. It's very light, okay? I found the clamp and all of that and the ear pad size and all of that just to be really comfortable for very long periods of time. Yeah, it just fits on the head well. It's got enough clamp that like doesn't really slide around on the head much, but it doesn't pinch very hard either. The design here and the build is very reminiscent of HiFiMan's HE6 series. Okay, it's not like one of the big egg-shaped ones. It's more like the HE6, and in terms of the build there. And yeah, we also have the attached cable here, which is looking better than it has. The issue I have with this attached cable is you can see it a little bit, how it's a little bit kinked up. Okay, down here after the cable split. This part here, I would find it would twist up and bunch up a lot, and I'd have to spend some time like unraveling it. And because it's always attached, like making sure that the plug doesn't fit through there and loop around this way, all of that, like you've got to take some care on that one too. So HiFiMan, they continue to struggle with cables and all of that. I understand why eStats use attached cables, but I mean, like when you're spending $4,000, I think just a little bit more thought and having a little bit less cable memory, like I don't know if I can untwist that. Yeah, that just seems really difficult. It's kind of just stuck that way with a little bit of twist in it. So that's a thing that happens there. It comes with this cool little aluminum stand, sits right on there like so. It is not the most stable thing in the world. Like if you come and you punch it this way, like push it this way a little bit as you're going to grab it, it can roll off either side. So there is that. So this is less functional than it is cool, unfortunately, okay, on that one. Okay, so I think that's good on the build of this thing. Let's think about sound on this piece right here on its own, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about the amp build and the amp sound on its own for a little bit, and then we'll get into some comparisons after that. It is very, I mean, it's a HiFiMan, right? It's got that sort of neutral-ish, just the headset now. It's got sort of that neutral tuning that has just a slight perceptive U to it, where there might be just a hair of elevated sub bass, although not that much on this one. I'd say this one is more linear in the bass, but it does seem to have just a little bit of air emphasis, but again, not that much. so I think more towards neutral in the tuning here. The treble response here, it always, like, it's every time that I thought it was about to go really sharp and sibilant, it like went right up to the line and then didn't cross it. Just stopped just short of doing truly sharp S's, T's, that sort of thing in the consonant range. Okay, the spatial presentation here is very good. Like, in terms of the way it's done, if you've heard the HE6 series, it's a lot like that in the way it's presented. It's still out in front of you, but it's not necessarily expansive. Okay, but it's not tiny or claustrophobic either. It's got good imaging and separation. It's got pretty good layering and all of that. The resolution is also good, and it's not super forward in its resolution, although it does have a little bit of that E-stat tendency because the decay is quick, that it can just sound a little bit drier and just a little bit more detail forward than some may be used to coming from planars or dynamic driver headphones there as well. So again, but I do think that the resolution is strong. Typical to HiFiMan's presentation is like where HiFiMan's resolving prowess shows up, in my opinion, and this one is not an exception, is when passages of music get really, really busy. So again, we're talking like the finale of the 1812 Overture, Duel of the Fates by John Williams, the 8th minute of The Poet and the Pendulum by Nightwish, if you want a different genre of music to check on there. Like, it doesn't freak out. It holds all of that together well. It still maintains its spatial coherence and its ability to separate vocals from each other and instruments from each other, and then vocals from instruments and vice versa. All of that, it keeps it cool through all of that, no matter how busy things get. And HiFiMan generally is very, very good at that. And that is like because they, as a brand, they don't really emphasize the detail retrieval. It's more subtle and, in my opinion, lifelike. That's really where it shows up, is just how cool the customers they are when the music just gets really, really complex and busy with a lot going on. They just kind of yawn and say, okay, what else you got? Okay, and this one is right there with them in that trait. So I think that is good. Now, what I noticed here, and this is going to be a theme through the review, I think, is that this is just really solid. The performance here of just the headset is really solid across the board. Like, it will show you differences, say, between this Energizer and like the LTA Z10E that I tried it on. Okay, it will, and I should say the test gear that I use primarily here, real quick, is like mostly my Berkeley Alpha Series 2. Either fed by a iFi Neo Stream as a Roon endpoint, or from a Singer SU tube connected USB to my computer, and then using Ottervana was the source, and then either into this Energizer for this or the LTA Z10E. Okay, so there's test gear in there. Okay, anyway, this one, like, it's really solid across the board, like all those traits that I mentioned. Like, it has decent dynamics, but not superb, and all of that. It's just really super solid at just about everything. Creates a very non-fatiguing and a generalist sound that works well with a wide variety of music. Like, I can't think of a style of music that I tried on here that I didn't enjoy. Okay, but at the same time, you're going to find other headsets, be they E-stats or planar / dynamic, whatever, that do individual things better, but are also, like, their weaknesses are going to be weaker than what this thing is, like, across the board. So again, it's kind of a generalist, sound very good to excellent with everything, but still kind of leave a little bit on the table. So if there's a specific trait you're looking for, you might need to find something else, but it's just really solid across the board. All right, there are some thoughts on the headset. Let's jump into amplifier build. then we'll do amplifier sound, and then we'll get into comparisons with this and other pieces of gear. All right, here we go. Unit tour of the Energizer here. We'll start with the front panel, and I'm also going to do this handheld camera style here. I'll try not to shake it around too much, but it's just going to be easier to show you all of the features and everything in the build by holding this by hand and being able to move the camera. So on the front panel, we have power button right here. We have 2 of the 5-pin style eStat headphone outputs here. HiFiMan's website does claim that you can use those simultaneously, or maybe it was their user manual. Anyway, one of those 2 places claimed you can use those 2 simultaneously. I didn't, but apparently that is an option. Then we have a stepped attenuator here, which I believe is a 24-step attenuator. And then these are indicator LEDs that glow white, that increase left to right. The louder it gets, the more of these will light up left to right. All right, this is a very uniquely designed amp here. Kind of look at the side panel to give you an idea of what we're looking at here. Like, just an interesting shape, and the whole thing sits on these metal rails underneath. Okay, so we get this just whole angled business, this trapezoidal shape on the profile where it's wider back here and then tapers towards the front. So it's very interesting in that way. And we have this really highly glossy, like, hello, look at reflections there, okay, but really highly glossy black finish on the top here. And yes, it is as sensitive to dust and debris and fingerprints. Like, what is that? I gave this thing a good cleaning, and then I notice I missed something here. You probably see my fingerprints on that too. And also highly reflective. So, I mean, you see my background reflected there in the top of it. So that's the thing. It does look nice, but you're gonna want to be dusting that and cleaning that, wiping that down with a soft cloth frequently. All right, it is a vacuum tube design. I think these are 6SN7 tubes. I'd have to go back and look, but I'm pretty sure they are. But they are special, so you're not going to want to just randomly tube roll these things. You're going to have to be very careful about switching these out. So if you buy this, follow what's in the user's manual on that. And you see that, like, each of the 4 tube slots has a number here, okay? All the way to A1 in the back. And then on the back of each tube, you see a corresponding number. So I don't know if it's really necessary to match those up, but you're probably going to want to. Okay, the vacuum tubes themselves, I think, are pretty high quality. I mean, it's, what, a $4,000 unit? Or is it $5,000? I don't know. I'll have to look that up. But the only thing is like, I would have preferred not to have the gray paint over top of the tube, because I like to look in and see the tube glow. But that's just a personal preference. Okay, I mean, it's well made. Other than that, like, solid aluminum here on the sides. It's got some good heft to it. This thing, again, it looks great, even though it's a dirt magnet. Okay, let me flip this around and show you the back panel. So I'm going to pause this real quick. All right, Energizer derriere here. And what we see is we've got standard power input plug here. We do have a voltage selector, so you can use this in the US where we're on the 115, or you can use it internationally just by flipping that switch there. Okay, some ventilation. And then we have 2 inputs. We have balanced 3-pin XLR and RCA unbalanced input like that. And you can select between those 2 by pushing this button here on the back. So yeah, you can run 2 sources into this, but you got to reach around to select which one you're going to listen to. So yeah, that might be a little inconvenient depending on what your situation is. But yeah, there's a tour of the unit. All right, let's get on with the rest of the review. Let's talk quickly about the sound of the Energizer unit itself here. I will try to get this out of your way. So my experience with electrostatic Energizers is less robust than with more traditional headphone amps. Okay, so I can give you some good ideas of like what this sounds like on its own, but I'm not going to be as comfortable in terms of being able to place it in the electrostatic Energizer market from like a value standpoint. So let me just drop that disclaimer out there. here real quick. Get that out of the way, and then we'll talk about it. So I found the sound of this thing to be to tend towards the warm and punchier side. Okay, so it's not that it's not neutral. Too bad. It's more neutral than it isn't, but I think it leans a little bit more into the warmth, and then it brings a little bit more dynamic impact than other Energizers that I have experience with, which is, again, only two others. That would be the Mjolnir Carbon and the LTA Z10E. All right, and I think this one's a little bit more dynamic than those two and a little bit warmer. It does a good job with positional effects, like, you know, it's got a nice wide soundstage, it's got some depth to it, and that sort of thing. But for the most part, I found that it fairly well gets out of the way, because I was able to try this with, you know, the matching headset here with the Shangri-La Senior, which I'm gonna have a video for in the near future, and the this right here, the Odyssey Carbon E-Stat, and it, you know, it fairly well got out of the way, I would say, other than it just injected a little bit of that warmth and just some of that tube fullness, that kind of stereotypical tube thickness, if you will, that comes with this. So if you're going for like really fast, dead neutral, almost, you know, if you like a cleaner, clear, I mean, I don't want to say clearer because it still has good clarity, but it doesn't come across as clean or as clear as like the Z10E or the Mjolnir Carbon does. It has a little bit of that tube thickness and flavor to it that you may or may not want, but from a frequency response standpoint is fairly neutral. But then again, it has good detail and reasonably good holography and all of that, and it's got pretty good low end, in particular, macro dynamics to it. It's got a fair amount of punch and slam in the low end, which I think with the E-Stat headsets that I've had has kind of filled them out a little bit, giving them a little bit more body to their sound. Okay, and that sort of thing. And again, I don't think that's so much a frequency response thing, although it is a little bit because of the warmth. I think it's a lot more to do with the impact. Just wakes them up a little bit, makes them a little bit more lively and a little bit more energetic and full sounding, and you know, in the low end, approaching more what, like, say the Vioelectric Sound can do for planars or dynamic driver headphones, something kind of like that, but still mostly neutral. Okay, just a little bit of that flavor creeping in there. Okay, comparing the Energizer then to those other other Energizers, the Mjolnir Carbon and the LTA Z10E. It's been a while since I heard the Carbon. I remember thinking that one was like on the very dry, a little bit detail forward kind of sound, which kind of, it takes the stereotypical E-Stat sound and emphasizes it just a little bit. Again, this one is a little bit thicker sounding, a little bit more laid back. Now, I did hear the Z10E and this one back and forth A-B quite a bit. And the Z10E is the more true neutral sounding one. It is more holographic. It is more accurate in its imaging and its separation. It may even stage just a little bit bigger, but it also still has a little bit of that dry sound to it, which might be what you're looking for with E-Stats, where this one again is a little bit thicker, fuller sounding, and it definitely has more weight and body to the low end in particular, okay, on it. And again, it macro dynamically, it hits a little bit harder than the Z10E does there as well. So I think it's a fairly solid unit. Again, I don't know that I can confidently say, yeah, it's a $4,000 or $5,000 E-Stat Energizer, because I haven't heard enough of those. But these two together do sound pretty good, and it makes the Shangri-La Senior sound really good too, although it'd be hard not to make that sound good. But it is a solid unit here. So you have the option, if you want, of getting this matched set, or just buying this on your own. So it's at least worth an audition if you're able to do that in any way, and if those traits that I just described appeal to you. All right, let's talk about the performance of this system together here, and it really is a pretty stunning experience. It sounds good with just a wide variety of music genres, just the tuning and the tonality of it, and then like the smoothness and the fullness of the amp added in with that together just creates a fairly engaging and reasonably lifelike presentation on just about any music genre I've thrown at it. Now, it's not super bassy, but it's got enough bass that I think some people will enjoy this for like EDM and hip hop and that sort of thing. It sounds pretty good and non-fatiguing for like hard rock and metal and all that. Even though there is some excess air, there's really not a ton of excess sibilance or anything like that. And I was able to listen to these for long periods of time for pretty aggressive rock and all of that without much in the way of fatigue at all, really. It has the resolution and like the timbral accuracy to sound reasonably convincing on acoustic instruments. So it's a very good generalist setup, honestly. I found it pretty enjoyable and engaging often. Okay, it's yeah, I mean, I will leave it there on that one. Is it worth $8,000? Like, probably together, it's a fairly good value at $8,000. Like, you're gonna have to spend more than $8K, I think, to consistently and comfortably beat it with any other combo. If you're looking for like just a general use, sounds good with a wide variety of genres of things. Like I'm a new Rune user, and I have been building a massive playlist in Rune that's just spanning a bunch of different genres, and then I shuffle it all up, and every time a track comes along, it doesn't really matter if it's metal or if it's EDM or if it's hip hop or if it's classic rock or it's a big symphony or it's just piano music or something like that. Like, it sounds pretty good. Okay, so there's that. The other side of that is I never really got the feeling that there was a trait that it just like really excelled at. Like, it's just very solid across the board as a generalist, and there's definitely place for that. But like, is it the best you're gonna get for, say, vocal timbre, $8,000? No, probably not. Is it going to be the most dynamic in terms of the physicality experience for $8,000? No. Is it going to be the best soundstage and imaging, the most holographic for $8,000? No. Okay. But it's just really, it's solid. It's just really robust and good at all of those things while not having that single thing that you're just like, wow. So, and maybe that's what you're looking for. If that's what you're looking for, great. Then here it is. Okay, so for these two together, I think I will leave it there, and then we will jump into comparisons of like the headset in particular with some other headsets. Okay, so let's get into that. All right, let's compare the Shang Jr. headset with the Odyssey Carbon headset here. Quick build comparison here is the cable for the Carbon is more friendly. It has a machined aluminum barrel on the 5-pin connector plug here, where the Shang Jr. has a plastic one. I don't know that that is a huge deal, but that is something that is probably worth mentioning. The Shang Jr.'s cable is like this flat ribbon style, kind of like this, whereas the Odyssey Carbon's is a little bit more oval shaped in its cable there. And the Carbon's cable hangs in a little bit more nicely. It is more ergonomically friendly, whereas I mentioned earlier, like, you can kind of get this twisty, tangly thing going on. It's not too bad at the moment thing going on with the Shang Jr. cable. Okay, and so forth. Now, comfort comparisons, the Odyssey Carbon clamps a lot harder on the head. So that's something to keep in mind. It probably does break in time, but it can be a little bit too much, like on the sides of the jaw for me at times, and I imagine other people will struggle with that as well. The clamp on the Shang Jr. here is very much in line with what HiFiMan does with this style headband, which they have on a lot of their headphone line on there too. So I might give the comfort edge to the Shang Jr. mostly for that reason. I think it's also just a little bit lighter. It's close though. It's not a huge difference in the weight there. Okay. Aesthetics or whatever. I mean, those are always in the eye of the beholder and all that. There is the driver crinkle issue that I talked about when I reviewed this one both times, and I will link to both reviews down below, that you need to be aware of, that I did not hear on the Shang Jr. or the Shang Sr. or either of the Stax headphones that I had back last year when I did some eStat reviews. Now, sonically, the Junior is going to have a little bit more of like the classic, well, HiFiMan house sound, where it's mostly neutral, just a slight bit of warmth and a little bit of air emphasis. So a gentle, perceptive U-shape to the frequency response, whereas this one is going to be a little bit more neutral mid-forward. The mids here were too forward for me, and so this one can inject some shoutiness and honkiness and also can kind of collapse the soundstage to my ear in comparison to this. Okay, this one, the carbon freaks out a little bit when things get really busy. So, I mean, we're talking about things like 1812 Overture, Duel of the Fates, that Nightwish song that's in my test tracks, the Poet in the Pendulum, where there's just a lot going on in that one, where this one can kind of freak out a little bit. This one keeps its cool a lot better. Okay, maintaining its integrity, maintaining its spatial and instrument separation and all of that more so than this one does to my ear. The carbon has a little bit more low-end oomph to it, a little bit more macrodynamic impact, regardless of which Energizer I plugged it into, be it the matching Junior Energizer or the Z10E. This one just, as far as E-stats go, it's among the punchiest and slammiest. It probably is the punchiest and slammiest E-stat that I have heard, which is not a ton of them, but I mean, it's competitive with some planar and even some dynamic driver models in terms of that ability there. The Shang Jr. is not devoid of macrodynamic impact. It's just not a standout feature like it is on this one. But again, if it were my money and my listening, I would take the Shang Jr. here. I like the bass presence and extension and rumble on this one. I like its impact, but on this one, the spatial presentation to me is superior. It maintains its resolution and its spatial and vocal and instrument separation, more so when passages get busy. And it has just a more natural tuning to my ear, where this one can get mid-forward, which injects some shout and honk and that sort of thing. So I would pick this one, and it's got enough of the dynamic impact and low-end presence and all of that to usually satisfy what I'm looking for on that. Okay, so that's the comparison between these two. Let's bring in the next comparison. I'll offer some quick thoughts on the Shang Jr. versus the Stax SR009S. It has been months and months since I heard the SR009S, but I remember liking it the best of the first batch of eStats that I got in last year. And that first batch included the SR009 and the Odyssey Carbon, which I moved over there. And I remember that SR009 as being very close to a true neutral in its frequency response and being very, very fast, very, very resolving. This one, from memory, the Shang Jr. is going to have a little bit warmer tonality to it, and I don't think it's going to be capable of the absolute detail retrieval that the 009S is. I'm going to have to leave it there, though, just because it's been so long since I've heard the 009S. I can't go into much more detail than that, but I know someone was going to ask me to make that comparison somewhere, so that's the best I can give you right now on that one. Okay, let's do another. All right, Shang Jr. versus HiFiMan's own Susvara. And one thing to notice here is the similarity in the design and the build. I mean, the cup shapes and size are very, very close. So you can definitely see the sibling resemblance, the family resemblance going on here, even though this one is a planar magnetic headphone and this one is an electrostat. Now, some might be saying, why are you comparing a planar to an e-stat? Those are two completely different things. And I get that, but I have a feeling that more people will have heard something more like this than they will have heard an e-stat. So I think it is worth at least talking a little bit about. But we should also throw in the caveat here that when you're comparing a planar or a dynamic to an e-stat, like, you're not comparing just the headphone, you're comparing everything that happens after a DAC. Okay, or after whatever your first source piece is, if you're plugging in turntables directly to amps or whatever. It's different from that point on because you need special energizers or amplifiers for e-stats where you can use more traditional headphone amps for, you know, this guy here, even though this one requires a lot of power. Now, there's definitely some similarities in the sound here because they both, not surprisingly, have kind of that HiFiMan house sound, which is mostly neutral, just a little hint of warmth in there, and then just a little bit up in the air frequencies, just a little bit of emphasis there. Although the Sus has a little bit less of that air emphasis than the Shang Jr. does. I think the Sus also has more sub-bass presence and rumble to it. Like, it can reach a little bit deeper, maybe punch just a little bit harder when properly powered than this one can, and then it rumbles a little bit more. Like, one example I can give you is the Why So Serious track from the Dark Knight soundtrack by Hans Zimmer. Okay, the synthesized bass line on there just sounds a lot richer, fuller, and feels rumblier through the Sus when properly powered versus what the Shang can do off of its matching Energizer or off of the Z10E. Okay, even my Vioelectric HPA V281, which is not the ideal amp for the Susvara, that difference is noticeable. Okay, you can hear the difference in the decay on sounds here too. The decay on the Shang Jr. is quicker than it is on the Sus. So the Junior is going to sound just a little bit more lean and a little bit less fleshed out overall than Susvara does to my ear. Which one is right is really hard to say, and that's going to depend on like what your brain thinks the reference points are. I personally preferred the tonality, the timbre, and the way that details are presented and all of that on the Susvara, even on my V281, as compared to this set working together. Okay, this one could sound, even though on an absolute scale it's not, in a relative to this one could, to the Shang Jr. system, could sound just a little bit more detail forward and detail over emphasis. Again, relatively, not in an absolute sense, at least compared to the Susvara. So the Susvara has a little bit more smooth, a little bit more blended together kind of sound because the decay lingers just a hair longer. So everything just sounds a little bit more smoothly blended together, whereas in comparison, this can sound a little bit more discreet, if you will, in its presentation, which I think is, again, I'm kind of hearing the inherent differences between planar tech and e-stat tech, okay, when I hear that, okay. I do think that probably the Susvara, the performance ceiling on what it's ultimately capable of is higher than the Shang Jr. is. I think even on this or the Z10E, I was probably getting close to what the Shang Jr. can do, his performance ceiling. I don't think I have heard anything quite close yet to what the Susvara is capable of. So scaling up, I think, is a thing that the Sus can probably do. Maybe this is wrong. It just seems like this one has more to give, where this one just kind of flattened out, okay, a little bit. Like jumping from this up to the Z10E. Yes, there was a little bit of a performance gap noticeable with this one. I've heard bigger changes happen with amps from this guy, from the Sus. So we'll see. Maybe in time I'll be able to more fully flesh that one out, but we'll see. That's my hypothesis for now anyway. Okay, the spatial presentations on these are pretty close though, because they are just very similarly designed, from like the cup shape, the pad shape, the driver to ear positioning, and all of that. So the spatial presentation is quite close in terms of how it's presented and the imaging and the separation and all of that. Again, I think the Sus can be a little bit more holographic, but this creates pretty close to the same kind of space that this one does, at least upon first listen. You can hear subtle differences in quality usually come out in the Sus's favor when you listen very carefully over extended periods of time. All right, I think that's good for this comparison. Let's do another. This is the one you were waiting for, wasn't it? This is the comparison. You've seen it sitting up there over my shoulder, the Shangri-La Senior headset. I don't have the Senior Energizer on hand. I just have the headset here. You see the difference in the design here. This one has the big egg-shaped cup that HiFiMan has featured in like their HE1000 series and all of that. There is still the HiFiMan house sound where it's like, this one is probably, the Senior here is it's tuned, I haven't seen frequency response graphs for it, but my sense is that it is very, very, very close to one of the Harman curves that has been out there. And now some people are going to hate that, some people aren't. I mean, I do think there is some value in the Harman curve, but it is just like one of the most tonally accurate headphone. It probably is the most tonally accurate headphone I've ever heard, honestly. And so just everything is better. I don't really know how to do a fair comparison here. There isn't a fair comparison here. You can tell they're both distinctly HiFiMan, but the Senior is just the superior to the Junior every way that it can be superior. I will have a video where I talk more about the Senior here on its own in the very near future, so stay tuned for that. So I guess we'll just call this little piece here a teaser for that video, but I know somebody was going to ask about this comparison. We'll come back to it when I get to this one on its own. All right, coming back after all of the comparisons and wrapping up the review here on the Shang Jr. set, okay, as a matched set. I enjoyed it a lot. I have really enjoyed listening to it. It is good. It is very good to excellent sounding on just about every kind of music I have thrown at it, while at the same time just not quite reaching the level of mind-blowing or setting the standard at its price point in any particular area. So it's more of a generalist system, I think, when taken together, that does just about everything well, but doesn't truly excel at any one thing. But that translates to, you can put this on your head, queue up a playlist that has just about every kind of music in it, and just let it go. And the sound is going to be non-fatiguing. The physical comfort is going to be pretty good. Like, you can keep this on your head and just go, like, all day long, pretty much, on just about any kind of music, or at least that's what I could do with it. And there is definitely a place for that, I think. And at $8,000 for the complete set, again, like, talking about the value of each piece on its own, particularly the Energizer, is tough, just because of the lack of experience I personally have with a wide variety of ESTAT Energizers. But I've been putting a lot of thought into, when you pick this up for $8,000, like, what other amp and headphone combo could I name that is this consistent at doing everything well, even if you trade in the fact that it's not completely great at any one given thing. And I'm having trouble coming up with that combo. Honestly, I have not heard every combo that there is, but like, I think about the Susvara and how much I like that headphone. And if you get that one on a good sale for a brand new price, you might get it for around $4,500. Okay, but it is amp picky, right? And though I unfortunately did not hear that one on the Orin Hypso stack, but I mean, that's what, 3,000 plus together. Okay, so you're getting up close to that 8,000 range. Maybe that, which I cannot confirm, I just hear people talking that combo up. Maybe that would get into the range where, yeah, you can do the same kind of thing. But I'm struggling to name another combo. So I think the value here of these together for $8,000 goes pretty far, honestly. Particularly if you are, like, if you have a work from home kind of job, and you can afford this and all of that, and you're looking for something that's just going to play a wide variety of music all day long, that's going to be very enjoyable, and non-fatiguing and all of that, I think you should look into this. Okay? I think that to me is kind of the use case here for this set. Okay, if you're looking to emphasize vocal performance or get like thundering, hard-hitting bass, or any other individual trait that matters more to you, maybe not. But doing everything well, non-fatiguing for long stretches, give this a look. All right, I'm Wave Theory. This has been my review of the HiFiMan Shangri-La Jr. Electrostatic Headphone System. Please check out my PayPal if you haven't. Please check out my Patreon, where you can join a Discord and talk to me and ask me questions to your heart's content. Please give a like if you haven't. Please subscribe if you haven't. Leave a comment down below. All of those things. Okay. So thanks for watching, and as always, enjoy the music.